Hi everyone, welcome to the CIPD North Scotland Islands branch event on the Relocating Partner and the key to assignment success. So my name is Shona Leonard, I'm the branch administrator. Our chair, Judith MacDonald, usually provides the introduction, but she's actually on an induction to students at the moment as we speak. So she may be joining later on. Just before I introduce the speakers, I'd like to remind you of our other November events, which you can sign up through our website or the branch newsletter as we sent out last weekend. So we have 3 in November coming up. We're on the 4th of November at 1 o'clock. We have how to get back into employment after redundancy, very relevant in today's climate. That's by Campbell Urquhart from White Cube Limited, so you may know him previously from the Urquhart Partnership. On the 10th of November at 1 o'clock, Roisin Connolly, the manager of Connecting Carers, is providing a presentation on the hidden carer in your team and how to support these employees. And on the 12th of November at 11 o'clock, our chair, Judith, is hosting a branch virtual coffee morning. This is the second one. We had one a few weeks ago and was successful. So it's just a very informal, if you like to, there's no agenda, just join on and chat about anything on the HR, O&D line. So that's the 12th of November at 11 o'clock. So without further ado, I'd like to present our speakers for today. Susan Gordon of Leaf Gordon Limited. Susan has 30 years experience in international oil and gas and as a university senior lecturer. And Susan's presented many times for the branch, so we welcome Susan again. And Des McKell, who's the Regional Director of UK and Ireland Net Expat. And Des has 25 plus years of experiences and learnings of talent mobility solutions. So over to you, Susan, first.
Great, yeah, I'm just thinking like half a century between us, like, oh dearie me.
Time to retire.
Hopefully there's something in there. So thank you, Shona. It's really, really good to, I see Judith joining. Hi, Judith. It's great to be here and to have the opportunity to chat to you. I'm working with Des McKell with Net Expat. Why am I part of this? Well, I suppose over my history is I was an expat child, born and brought up in India. I then over my HR years, which were over 30 years in HR, as Shona said, I worked in, somebody will recognize this, Azerbaijan, looking after Azerbaijan, Georgia and Turkey. Most of my working career, however, has been in the UK and in oil and gas. A few years as a senior lecturer with one of the universities in Aberdeen as well. When I left oil and gas, which was about 5 years ago, I worked for BP at the time, I then started up my own consultancy business. And one of the things that I do is I work with Net Expat and support expatriate partners as they relocate to not just Aberdeen actually, but Scotland as a whole. So my experience here is partly from an HR perspective, having looked after expats in my time, partly as a mother who took 2 young kids and a husband to Azerbaijan, and I was the working one, and partly as a consultant now in terms of coaching and career. I've really enjoyed being with Net Expat for about 4 years and really look forward to the chats today. I'm going to hand over to Des and he's going to start us off.
Yeah.
On you go.
Thanks very much, Shona, Susan, and great to meet you all. Thank you for the opportunity. Just a brief introduction. Shona sort of touched on my 25 plus years. So much of that time has been spent helping organizations really create their talent mobility programs and coordinating service delivery. About a year ago, I had the opportunity to join Net Expat. We're market leader in 2 very distinct fields. The first is intercultural training, both for those people that are mobile, moving overseas, but also certainly much more magnified as a result of COVID, also for virtual leaders in providing training around cultural agility, but also relocating partner assistance, as Susan suggested. And that's really what we're here to talk about today. So, you know, as a broader sort of platform, I mean, I think as we begin to exit, hopefully, the COVID situation, whenever that might be, I'm not sure there's ever been a more important time to consider the relocating partner, you know, as it relates to your talent strategy. It was interesting to hear a few of you talk about relocation, mobility experience, and certainly the indicators are that once we do get through the blockages of immigration and travel, you know, organizations are still very keen to mobilize their talent overseas. So we're really happy to be here to sort of amplify that conversation, maybe stimulate a little bit of new thinking, share some experiences, and maybe provide one or two little takeaways for you as well. So the next 90 minutes or thereabouts, I'm going to share some highlights from our Relocating Partner survey. I'll talk about that in a bit more detail shortly. We do have a small group, so we might just end up having a group discussion, but we had planned for a bit of a breakout conversation just to get your own experiences of mobility. We'll also share our top tips as we see them, as again, we come out of COVID, you know, the things that we feel will be essential in providing support to partners. Susan will share some of her rich experience through some case studies, and of course it's your session. So, you know, please, if you've got any questions along the way, just shout them out. I think Shona's going to keep an eye on the chat box as well. So we'll pick those up as they come along. So hopefully that sounds okay. But, you know, please, we do want it to be interactive. You don't want to listen to me for 45 minutes or, you know, Susan and I for best part of an hour and a half. So do jump in. But I think, Susan, we're going to start with just a couple of quick polling questions and then we'll get into the survey, right? I think you might be on mute.
Yes, I was having a little cough, so I put myself on mute. So, yeah, so just 2 or 3 questions to kind of get a feel for who's out there and what your experiences are. So I'm going to launch the first poll, and there's a yes/no answer. So if you would be kind enough to answer this, yeah, genuine question: have you ever been on an expatriate assignment yourself? Anybody waiting to? We're waiting for one person to answer. Anybody going to? Right, I'll just end the poll and we can see what. Oh, thank you, whoever that was. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and show you what the results are. So interesting in terms of our group here. We have got coming up for 20% have been on an expat assignment. When you put this into actual terms of who's answered this, that's one person. One person who answered this has been on expat assignment. So, sorry, I didn't share the results. I have now shared the results. As Shona said, you know, we'll get there eventually in terms of this. So that's interesting. One of you been on an expat assignment, or one of those who answered. I'm going to ask you the next, just go on to the next question, Des, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely, yep.
Yeah, okay. So the next one is, and I think we kind of answered this when you were chatting away informally, have you ever had a role which included looking after expatriate employees and their partners?
So you're the folk we're going to be asking questions later, you know, in terms of your experiences.
Yeah. So as we kind of, it's kind of interesting, it's flipped around here. So one person's been an expatriate assignment, but actually one person isn't dealing currently with that. So that's interesting. Okay. And shall I just go for the third one?
Absolutely. Yep. Thanks.
Okay. And third one, and then we promise we'll get going, is where is your organization at the present moment thinking, you know, where's their thinking on terms of talent movement? Are they thinking about moving or not because of everything, or you just don't know? Okay. So here we go. So even with the tricky times that there are just now, it seems that one person isn't aware, but most of you think, yeah, you're going to be doing a bit of movement. So hopefully this session is going to be really useful for you. Put some stuff in practice.
Thanks, Susan.
So over to you, Des.
Yeah, and I think actually that's a really nice segue we hadn't planned for the next section, because actually before we dive into the Relocating Partner survey that I'm going to share with you, I just wanted to step into the minds of our CEOs to really understand, you know, what is their number one concern. And certainly, according to a survey of over 1,000 global CEOs, it is all about attracting and retaining and developing talent. And maybe that'll come as no surprise to you guys, because that's essentially your world. But again, every indication is that once we come through this current pandemic, that this is just going to be continually amplified. So again, I think it's kind of time to get ready. And I think what I'd also do is make a fairly bold prediction that if you haven't been asked, or if any of your talent colleagues haven't been asked these 3 questions already by your CEO or your CHRO, I'm pretty sure they're coming away in the next 6 to 9 months. And the first one is, you know, when we're offering people the opportunity to move overseas, why are they rejecting that opportunity? When we do move them, you know, why are those moves failing? But critically, the third question is, what are we doing to overcome the challenges? And I think, again, you know, maybe this is just a quick takeaway from the session today. If you don't have the answers to these questions, you might want to just take the notion back, talk to your talent colleagues, and just try and figure out whether you can get a better handle on these questions, because they are coming, believe me. And the C-suite are going to want to know what the strategy is around being able to mobilize the talent going forward. So the Relocating Partner Survey, we completed this in association with EY. It was the largest ever survey completed with a lens on relocating partners and spouses. There was almost 3,500 respondents, over 300 global organizations, but importantly, the voice and views of over 1,000 relocating partners. So it's a really rich report, you know, full of insights and data. I guess the challenge we had for today was try to squash some highlights into the session that we've got available to us, and I'll do my best to do that. It's going to be quite quick fire. I'm going to go through some of the slides very rapidly, but I hope it will tell a story. You're very welcome to access a full copy of that survey. We'll make sure that we provide you with a link, or you can come through me and I'll happily email it across to you after the session today. So we began the survey by asking HR and mobility leaders, you know, who amongst them provided support to relocating partners. And it was a really strong start. You know, 90% of organizations said that they provided some form of support to partners. And I would just caution you, remember the phrase some form, okay? But, you know, that's a great start. The fact that people at least recognize that helping partners in some way is perhaps a good place to be when they're trying to achieve assignment success. The next thing we wanted to do was to really understand why they're offering support to partners. And it seems that it's for all the right reasons. And it was great to see that their motivation was around the wish to improve the assignment experience. And also really important to see that they were looking to use that support as a lever to increase the uptake of the offer of an assignment. So again, you're kind of on the right track here. These are beginning to tick all the right boxes, and it's looking pretty good so far. Then we wanted to shift to really understand the status of the partner or the spouse pre-assignment. And this, I think, was one of the first staggering statistics. You know, almost 80%, 77% of partners and spouses are professionally active prior to consideration of an assignment. And you can see that as the age decreases, the percentage of working partner actually increases. So for Generation Y partners, it's 90%. And again, that may not surprise you. It may surprise you. It may be something that you're not tracking today. It may be something that you want to take away and consider whether you've got the ability of having a better lens on that. But the obvious next step was to really understand, what's the direction of travel here in relation to that particular statistic. And, what we heard back from employers was an overwhelming reaction and confirmation that actually the proportion of working versus non-working partners has just continued to increase over the past 5 years. And again, every indication is that that's not going to change, that number is just going to continually increase. And as I say, might be something that if you don't track today as you're beginning to have those assignment conversations, it's probably something that it would be worth including in your list of Q&A. The next obvious question was the importance of the family dual income. And it's pretty important. As you can see here, almost 70% of the employees that we asked stated that it was either a significant or critical factor. Not important or not nice to have, significant or critical factor in making the consideration of a move viable in the first place, but certainly being long-term successful. And again, this really is the first kind of red flag, I think, as we start to go through the findings of the survey. And I think is maybe the question to ask yourself, do we feel by standing back that the policy and the support that we have in place today is going to sufficiently support the statistic? And again, that might be something that you want to take away. So if we just take a breath and recap for a minute, we know that most companies are offering support to relocating partners. So there's a relatively good tick in the box there. We know that a high proportion of partners are professionally active prior to considering an assignment, and we know that that number is just going to increase year on year. And we also know that 70% of families consider the dual income as being a critical factor in being able to move and make that assignment a success. So what we really wanted to do at this point, perhaps with a larger group, was just to break out into several conversations. But I'm just wondering, Susan, Shona, based on the number that we have, unless we feel we've got enough to split into two groups, that we were going to encourage you just to have a quick group discussion, and then come back and feed that back to the wider group. So I don't know how many we've got in, Shona.
We have 8 participants,
okay,
including ourselves. So
yeah, I mean, there's probably 5 people. I see somebody just dropped out. So
yeah.
Why don't we, if everyone's okay, maybe we just stick in this room, as it were.
Yeah, I think that would make perfect sense.
It's a small enough group, and hopefully folks can feel as though they can get their voice in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first question was just trying to get a sense for how you've previously supported partners, moving overseas, in relation to the logistics. So, has that been something that's been supported through managed one-to-one support, either internally or externally, perhaps by providing cash allowances? And if you're not doing it currently, again, feel free to refer back. Please don't mention any employers' names that you're not comfortable referencing, but it may be a previous employer. So just in terms of getting a sense for how people have managed this in the past, I think would be really great if anyone's willing to unmute and kick off the conversation.
Dive in, folks. Don't be shy.
My previous company, we actually didn't really financially support working partners, to be honest. We provided things, schooling perhaps, or assignment, finance, an extra bonus, if you like, for depending on where they were coming from. But I don't remember actually providing actual support, direct support.
Okay. Alistair, I think you were coming off mute there. Did you have a view on
Yeah,
this?
it was just not, well, my experience when I was working overseas was largely in remote areas. So it was mainly unaccompanied assignments that most of the, I certainly was on, and most of the expats. We did have one or two partners that joined that came out, and we were quite heavily reliant on our clients' sort of wider network groups for the support options. Working in those locations was limited.
Right.
I think one or two of the partners did manage to get jobs within the clients had kind of almost like camps that were kind of, they were able to kind of utilize services there. We did try and put things in place, for support there for schooling and things like that. And I know colleagues within the business currently, if they're going to, I guess, less remote areas, that kind of, I guess, Houston, Middle East, things like that, that's probably more the accompanied status, elements. And again, I know that there are difficulties with, the working arrangements of the partner. But you're right, and it can make or break whether the assignment actually works out.
Right, and you know where this conversation's going. That's why we're here today, and we'll share a few more stats. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's and it's not often, it's not always the working either. To your point, I think when the partner is there, again, they may be limited by their inability to work. But it's about the sort of the support system that you wrap around them in terms of helping them to integrate, or it may be that they want to throw themselves into some volunteering, or take some extra educational lessons and what have you. But again, without the support in place, or without the framework in place, I think people can often fall through the cracks.
I think so, and I think some people. Yeah, I would agree, and I think sometimes we had I recall when I was overseas, one or two of the partners were very self-starting and almost created embraced the client network, but also created their own network. Within that, which was great, but there are a number of considerations. I think it was helpful for us as a company because. I don't think unaccompanied status, assignments are particularly, sometimes the way forward either. So it really depends on what you're. I think some of the times it's what is the work, where is the work, and what can happen outside, what can happen outside of the work to keep people, in a good balance. And I think even, I guess the last 6-7 months that we've had, people are more tuned into having ensuring that they've got that balanced, home life or outside of work, experience that they can lean on, rather than just going into a bubble of 12-hour days on rotational, working, or even live in, and where you've only got work to go to. Yeah,
it's a really good point.
Just sort of picking up on that point in terms of the last little while, what I've noticed is that partners who are particularly new in location, of course, when you're new in location, you don't know anybody. And there have been some people here. I mean, one of my clients, he arrived here on the 20th of March. So by the 24th of March, guess what? He wasn't getting out of the house. And so how do you build a network, etc.? That and being in the house with your partner who's also a little bit stressed has been quite difficult. So without any sort of social network around them, it's been quite tough. Conscious Debbie, were you going to add anything? No. Okay.
And by the way, Susan, you're going to have to keep an eye on that, because as I thought, my technology is freezing up on me. So I've got lots and lots of screens in front of me. But I can't scroll. I can't do anything other than click the slides on. So I'll ask you to keep an eye on the chat box.
Okay.
What about anybody else? I mean, and we can jump around these questions. Experiences. I mean, Alistair was kindly sharing there some of the kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly that can take place. Just the general temperature check. If you had to sort of consider whether you're doing enough today for partners. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but any views, any thoughts on this?
It's been a few years since we actually took somebody on a secondment into the UK. Our big problem was the dog had to come too.
Yep.
Oh yes, yes,
Cause
been there.
Problems on the children or the partner.
Right.
It's very hard to get a dog from France into the UK and then a couple of years later move it on to the US.
Right.
But no, as far as partners' children, we have a procedure in place from our parent company that outlines everything that they get, including moving allowance, education, flights home to their own country, X number of times per year. That's a very important one for them, and quite a lot of allowances like that.
Yeah.
That's good. And again, just to add to that, I mean, certainly when I worked with BP, as you well know, BP's got at that point had a really good expatriate package of support, particularly when you were like in somewhere like Azerbaijan. So really good package in place, all the sorts of things you mentioned, Helen. The one thing that I reflected on at the time, and at the time I was the HR person, so it wasn't, although I was also an expat with an accompanying partner, I was the HR person. I didn't really kind of get it at the time until later on. And what we didn't do very well was support the expat partner. You know, financially, schooling, etc., etc. But here we were, you know, a group of predominantly women, not just women, you know, my husband as well, but who were professional, who were unable to necessarily work in Azerbaijan, starting to feel really quite worthless, I think would be fair to say. So, you know, with social workers, lawyers, dentists, you know, like a whole heap of really professional folks who ended up feeling quite devalued and not the opportunity to do anything. So a lot of frustration and sometimes leading to early termination of the assignment because it was just too much.
And that's a really good point, Susan. I think we're beginning to see that, you know, through the conversations we're having with our clients. And it's interesting. I think COVID has accelerated some of this, but it's very, very rare for a logistical aspect of an assignment to break it. And what I mean by that is, you know, if somebody's belongings don't turn up, it's a pain, but it's probably not going to bring the assignment to an end. If they have to move because their housing isn't quite what it should be, again, it's probably not going to bring the assignment to its end. It's the human and the emotional things that will break an assignment.
But the things that are tangible are the house isn't good enough, etc., etc., etc. That's the tangible thing. But it's when you dig underneath it, you see that actually, you know, give them a palace, they still wouldn't be happy.
Right, absolutely.
So.
No, thanks for the contributions. That's really helpful. Anybody else before we sort of continue through the survey?
And Moto G8, don't worry about coming off mute if you want to. It's fine if the kids are in the background. So you've said here on the chat, however, your experience is similar to that already outlined. Not a great deal of support for partners, specifically more for family, generally speaking. So yeah.
Okay, well, please at any point, you know, jump back in and we can continue that conversation. So we really wanted to know what the impact had been of those people that had been providing support. You know, what was the return on investment, and so on. And remember, you know, the objectives of these organizations that were providing support was to improve the experience and to increase the uptake of the opportunity to move overseas. So if you had to look at this scale and think that we're asking an employee, you know, how much support is your employer providing to your partner, where do you think we're going to be on this scale of 0% to 100%? Anyone willing to take a guess? And again, this was a big sample. We're talking about, you know, thousands of people being asked this question, or I can put you out of your suspense and tell
No,
you.
no. Well, where would? Okay.
Too late.
Too late. Give me an answer.
And this is really where the wheels started to fall off. So you'll remember that there were quite a lot of ticks in the boxes in terms of people's desire to do the right thing, and they kind of got it in terms of wanting to improve the experience and increase uptake. But only 31% of employees felt that their employer was doing enough to support their partner, and that's a pretty damning response to that question. And then we asked the same question of the employers. So the people that were managing the mobility program, the HR leaders, again, same question. How well do you think you're providing support to the relocating partner? And only 64% felt that they were doing a good job. And again, when you consider that these are the very people that were driving the policy and putting the support in place, and to think that only 2/3 of them thought that they were doing a great job, again, it's not a great starting place. And then when you look at that and you consider what the main reasons for assignment rejection are, again, it starts to build the story, because in spite of the support, and in spite of the aim of using the help and the assistance as a lever for mobility, the fact that the partner was unwilling to move, as you can see here, is the #1 reason for an assignment being rejected. And that number actually spikes fairly significantly for female employees. And that's another red flag for me. And when you consider the focus on D&I and the initiatives to increase female-led assignments, it's really the kind of the outdated and unsupportive policy provision that's really equaling risk, and I think we're looking at risk here in terms of not being able to mobilize your talent. And for anyone that I think sits in that space and is managing talent and mobility and trying to initiate moves, I mean, for me, that's a huge wow. It really is. So let's take a look at the cost of a typical 3-year assignment, because this is the investment. This is the investment in the individual and the partner and the family, and you're spending a tremendous amount of money. You can see here, this isn't a scientific analysis, but it's a pretty good judgment. Alistair, you've had some experience, of course, of moving people on long-term assignments. Helen, been a few years, perhaps, as you say, but again, this might resonate with you. If you're investing close to £1 million, you want to maximize the success and the ROI, and you certainly want to mitigate the risk. So when we start to dive into the reasons for failed assignments, once again, there's a really strong correlation and connection here to the relocating partner and spouse. And not providing sufficient support is potentially placing that enormous investment at significant risk. And when you look at that statistic of 71% leading to failure, again, it's really got to be another red flag statistic. So if we recap again, we know that companies recognize the value of providing support. We know they want to improve the employee experience. We know that the number of partners working is growing, and that's set to continue for several years. We know that the family income, the dual income, is really critical and significant to making it successful. And we also know that employees feel pretty underwhelmed by the support that's being offered typically to their partner. The fact that that's leading to so many assignments rejecting and so many assignments failing, that's really got to hurt. And the thing is, most organizations can actually enjoy some really quick wins. It's often very cost neutral. And HR leaders called out to us a number of ways that they felt they could do that relatively easily and relatively quickly. Better communication with the partner is fundamentally critical, and it's free. It's not going to cost you a penny to increase their involvement and to ensure that you do that as early in the process as you possibly can. So we're talking pre-decision, not just pre-departure. It's absolutely essential that you get the partner involved in that conversation at the pre-decision phase. You know, their voice and their opinions and their concerns are really important. You know, Susan has experience of this day in, day out, listening to the worries and the concerns. Far better to understand those before they make a decision or before they leave than to start, you know, unearthing those once they arrive. Improve the visibility of the support. You know, really take the time to understand the options that are out there. You know, research the solutions, the costs and the benefits of this. You know, when we consider that it costs up to £1 million to support somebody on a 3-year investment, and you know the risk of not providing support to the partner, you know, it may come as a surprise to you that the cost of providing support to a partner, it's typically less than putting somebody in a hotel for a week. All right, you know, it's a fraction of the cost of what you're investing in a cross-border move. So again, it seems sensible when you go back to those 3 questions that the CEO is definitely going to ask you. You know, just take the time to understand what the solutions are, what the options are, and really be ready to educate the business would be my key takeaway. You know, take the time to understand the risk, and hopefully some of these slides will have provided some collateral there. So understand the risk, but also be ready to talk about the value of doing a little bit more for the partner. And we're not talking about throwing cash at them. Cash actually doesn't help. It's not very helpful most of the time. Giving somebody cash to support their partner or their partner's career, in all likelihood, they're not going to know what to do with it. It's just going to get simply lost in the bank account. They won't know how to use that money. It's much better to find a solution that will provide that support to them. So just, you know, use the opportunity to really get ready to address those 3 critical questions. So Susan, we're just going to shift gears a little bit. Susan's going to take a bit of time just to bring it to life through her own experience with some case studies. So Susan, I'll fire back to you and just tell me when to push on the slides.
Thank you. Before we go on, does anyone have any questions of Des before we? Feel free to ask if you do. Okay. So what I want to do is just kind of give you a flavour of what's happening here and how it might help. As I said before, my experience of having run the global mobility team in Azerbaijan was that, again, I thought we were doing a pretty good job in terms of supporting people. And then I saw that the pain that some people go through because they're not able to contribute financially or not able to keep their careers going. And so that's what I really love about this, is being able to support people to really make a difference to them and their family and really enjoy the assignment they've got here to its most effective, which allows their working partner in turn, the person that you've hired, to actually get on with their job. So as you can see here, I've just put a little map together to say, you know this yourself, but people come to Aberdeen and to Scotland from across the world. And here are some of the areas that I've personally dealt with over the last 4 years. It's not comprehensive, there's a couple missing, but you can see they come from all over the place. And as they come to Aberdeen, what we can offer them is kind of like a hub, a network, net expat, but a network of and a community of support in reality. So they come here, maybe don't know anybody, maybe they know some of the people in the company that they're with, but Aberdeen as an expatriate assignment is actually quite a difficult place to be. In some ways, you're probably better off on your like hardship location like you were, Alistair, because everyone's in it together. You come to likes of Aberdeen, you're just expected to get on with it. But still, you don't know you don't know how things work around here, and how the hell do I go about getting a job? And is it the same as you know, when I come from Indonesia? Is it the same thing that I'm doing here? So having a support network is vital. And you see here, I've also put some photographs of the various get-togethers that we've had, meetups that we call them, over the last couple of years. And you see the sort of various people that come together, a Christmas night out, or just a wander around the Gordon Highlander Museum, or a meal out at the Turkish restaurant, in the days that we could meet together. In the days just now that we can't meet together, we meet virtually about once a month, once every 6 weeks, which also gives people a chance to see each other and connect with folks. So the point there is about, they come from all over and they come here. And again, when they come here, back to the point about the working partner doesn't know how to help their partner necessarily integrate. And they don't necessarily want to ask the organisation for that help either, because they're rocking up to work pretending to be, you know, all firing all cylinders, ready to go. They don't want to be telling you that their partner's sitting at home literally crying because they've got no friends, which, you know, even as adults, we do. So just skip on. So I mentioned, you know, people come from all over the world. We also have people, as Des mentioned, who are professional folks in a whole variety of different areas. Increasingly, people are coming to, in this case, Aberdeen, and they want to work. They want to keep their career going. They've invested heavily, time, money, all the rest of it, in becoming a doctor, in becoming a whatever. And why should this assignment stop them? So you can see there's a range of things already done. Again, not comprehensive, but it gives you a flavour. But it just sort of shows you that those stats that were seen in the survey about increasingly people working, increasingly it being quite a professional side of things, and also the income that they may be bringing into the family could be severely dented as well if they're doing this. So having them start to work with somebody about, okay, this is what you want to do, how possible is it here? And depending where they're coming from and what they want to do, there maybe needs to be a bit of flexibility. But for some, you know, they can do exactly what they want. Others, I say, much more flexibility needed. So a whole range of things. So I thought what might help to put it into perspective or give you some flavour here is I've got 3 case studies of very different people, loosely based on real people, just in case you happen to know any of them. But it gives you a flavour of the kind of different things and the different kind of challenges that people have as the expat partner. I think one of the things is that there's often a view, and yeah, I'm not saying that you've necessarily got this, but there's often a view in the HR teams who are managing the expatriate is that their partner is a bit of a pain in the backside. You know, here we go, and the stereotyped expat trailing wife who's going to, you know, sit on the sofa, eat crisps, drink gin, etc. That's so far from the truth, so far from the truth. Maybe once upon a time that might be it, but not it now. So here's a flavour of the sorts of things that we can help with and the kind of challenges. So here we have Moira. Moira, in her mid-50s, half Scottish actually, and half South African, kids away from home now. And she's spent many, many years being an HSE professional and worked all over the world. Latterly, she was working in Chad, sorry, her husband was working in Chad, and when she was in Chad, she couldn't work because of various visa restrictions, etc. So she was there for about 3 years, wasn't able to work. So by the time that she moved to Aberdeen, following her husband, she had completely lost confidence in what she did as an HSE professional that she'd done for like 25 years. But you know, we have discussions about it and, you know, all the various options that she could do. And she started to search for roles, but her heart was really, really not in it. And she was getting quite distressed about it all and starting to apply for things, and it wasn't going well. So we sort of sat and worked with her, and eventually it was kind of like her confidence, like say, rock bottom. It's like, okay, what is it you want to do here? And over a series of conversations, actually got her to reflect on, this is an opportunity that she could take. How does she want to use it? And she actually came up with a really surprising outcome. She said she wanted actually to retrain to be a celebrant. Now, I don't think very many people would expect that one to be coming up. But like I say, working with her, we were able to track to see what would it take to do that retraining, which she then went and did. And now she's a qualified celebrant. And I'm pleased to say she's done a few weddings available. Weddings or bar mitzvahs or whatever it is the saying is. So that was a nice, successful outcome, but with a lot of angst involved in it and a lot of soul searching, and some tears, mainly hers. And then, but like I say, an outcome now is that she's very happy. Of course, the whole COVID thing has made her change. What does she want to do? I'm not working with her anymore, but I keep in touch with her. And actually what she's now starting to do is see how she can do these sessions virtually. So helping her discover how she can do that. So that's Moira. The next case study, very different, Benedita. Benedita was from Brazil, and she was in her late 30s, 2 young kids at school here in Aberdeen. Actually a qualified doctor, and her specialism was skin cancer dermatology. She had accompanied her partner around the globe, as you can see there, from Mexico, and I think she was also in Peru. And then because she couldn't work in those countries, again, because of work permit kind of stuff, and she had her kids at that time, but it meant that she was out of the workplace, being a doctor, practicing as a doctor, for about 3 years. So when she came to the UK, what we did was we sat and said, what do you want to do? Passionate about dermatology, wants to do that. So she started to do her checks with the medical council in terms of what does it take to be a doctor here in the UK. Long, drawn out, painful process. And I helped her with some of the documentation. And they ultimately decided that because she had 3 years out, she couldn't practice as a doctor in the UK. Which, as you can imagine, is devastating. So that's going to be something that could really affect a relationship as well as your assignment. Luckily, what we did is, through a contact that I have, managed to get her to actually start volunteering at the local dermatology clinic, doing real work, but volunteering. And she worked there for about a year as a volunteer, and they actually invited her to apply for a role that came up as a clinical lecturer in the medical school at Aberdeen University. And she started doing that. Absolutely loved the job. So the day I get the call from her, again in tears, husband's been moved to Houston. And the positive thing with that is, apart from, she was gutted that she had to leave her job, but the positive thing was, through NetExpat, we were able to connect her to people in Houston, the contacts in Houston. So as soon as she arrived, she was able to pick up a social network and also a how do I go about getting a job here network. So unfortunately, she's got to go through the whole process again, and she's considering whether, if an expat life isn't consistent with keeping up your medical practice. So she's thinking maybe of changing from that. So that's Benedita. And our last case study, very different one. Increasingly, by the way, we have male partners who are, that we're supporting. Again, why would that be a surprise? But I think the stereotype of the wife following, it's no longer the case. It's all sorts. When we moved to Azerbaijan, people were quite surprised that my husband gave up his job to follow us. These days, there is no surprise. Anyway, Murat, Turkish guy, early 30s, they don't have any kids, recently married, and he followed his wife to Aberdeen after she'd been here herself on single assignment for about 9 months. Now, Murat worked with the government organisation, I suppose, in Turkey as a mud engineer, and had also always hankered to move into being a drilling engineer. And when he arrived in Aberdeen, he thought this was a pretty easy thing to do. Although he didn't have any experience, really keen, really bright. However, as we all well know, oil and gas industry, not a happy place. And within that, drilling as a whole, really not a happy place. One of the things that I try to do is try and see if we can organise meetings with people that we know, contacts that we know, so that folks who arrive here can start to go and have a chat about what's happening in this environment. I'm interested in doing this. How would I go about it? Just gather that information. It was really, really difficult to get anybody to speak to him, because at that point, it just all collapsed in itself, and everyone really entrenched. And I think as well, one of the things an organisation can help with a partner is have those conversations about what it's like to work. You know, have somebody locally that they can speak to within the company about what it's like to work here. Anyway, he did meet this person once, but you know, he got the vibe that the guy wasn't really interested in doing any more. Anyway, what he's actually started to do is he's discovered he doesn't want to go offshore. He could get drilling jobs offshore, but he didn't want to do that. And he's actually started to retrain and do a project management postgrad course in the hope of redirecting his career a little bit once he steps into the next stage. So that one, you know, that felt less of a success in a way, because you know, he had real challenges there, but a success in terms of he's now kind of happily settled in redirecting and really energized by that. So 3 different case studies show different challenges, different pressures, different things. Now, when things go well, what you tend to find is the expat partner typically is these things here. Now, there's a lot of words in there, and you'll be getting the presentation afterwards, so I don't feel bad about putting all these words here. What I was trying to show here is that, again, sometimes the impression is that the HR folks think that if the partner is given this program to support them with career changes, that it's almost kind of like the partner is sitting back and letting the consultant do everything. I can tell you it is not like that. The partners who are successful in doing this, they are really invested in this. They will put their whole heart and soul into it. They're engaged. They take charge of the plan here. They're the ones that are getting out and about and speaking to people. They're working with you. Listen to what you've got to say, using the range of tools and resources that expats got, plus quite willing to go out and connect with people. Also quite flexible at thinking about alternative options. You know, for example, Des mentioned earlier about volunteering. Now, that one's quite interesting. You've got to be quite culturally sensitive. For some cultures, it's actually detrimental to be seen to have on your CV that you're volunteering. Whereas in the UK, we think it's a great thing. So that's quite interesting. But I think overall, what we're saying here is that when these things go well, big part of it is that the partner thinks that this is great and they get after it. This is not the consultant doing stuff for them. So don't think they're just, say, sitting on their backsides watching daytime TV. They are not. So when things go well, that's what's happening with the partner. If you just skip on, I've got a couple more slides and then we'll take questions. And sitting behind that, I think Des mentioned it before, there's something about the company. So you know, their partner's company that's sponsoring this, what have they done? And my observations is about 2 or 3 key things that the company itself can do to really help this. Des mentioned communicating the service effectively. I think that's absolutely right. this service needs to be communicated effectively to both the employee and the partner. Now, for those of us who have been expat, we will know that when you go on an expatriate assignment, the person that's working for the company will get a stack of stuff this thick about everything that's been offered. And on page 89 might be a sheet about this service. They're never going to get to that. And that's, you know, if the working person does it, if their partner, they may never even see that pack. So make sure that the partner themselves know that this is available, it's on offer, and ensure that you tell them in good time. You know, you may have individuals who find out about they have this service, but actually you've got to take it up within 6 months or a year of arriving in your new location, by which time it's, you know, 9 months in and they suddenly realize, oh, can I use it, can I not? So tell them in timely fashion. And also, I think if the company that sits behind it really understands the service, the things that we've mentioned before, and its benefits, and actively encourages its use rather than kind of flicking it away like, yeah, it's in the pack somewhere, off you go. Again, that's when you'll get the benefit. Absolutely, when the company is also supporting it, actively supporting it. I think I'll just skip on. I think there's one more. And I think what having a net expats consultant locally can offer is a variety of things. And to be honest, depending on who it is, it's maybe more of one or more of another. But overall, a friendly local sounding board, local being important, and how do you do things around here? Confidential support. Time and again, I'm struck by oftentimes these expat partners have got no one else to go to. And there can be some quite deep conversations that you get into, but they have no one else to go to. And we know that in the likes of Aberdeen, 6 degrees of separation probably reduces to about 2. So who do you go to for a confidential conversation, either about how you're feeling or the fact that you want to go for this job and you want to get prepared, and you've just found out that it's your competitor that you're speaking to, and so good to have that. It's someone to help your partners rebuild, refine their self-confidence. As I said, they get battered around a fair bit. Role-playing, practicing can be really useful. For example, Benedita, she went for the job interview, hadn't been aware that actually you could have a panel interview. In Brazil, that doesn't happen. So we practice, how would you deal with a panel interview? So it sounds really simple, doesn't it? But at the same time, if you've not tackled a panel interview before, then it could be a bit disconcerting. Trying to connect people where you can to local contacts, because as we all know, much easier for somebody to say yes to a conversation if they know that's a connector. And also a resource for now, but also in the future. So as people go on to their next assignment, again, we can help connect them through to there, which means that the next assignment has got a better chance of starting up more quickly, more effectively, I suppose. So, I mean, those are my kind of observations. I've spoken long and hard there, so I'm going to stop now. What's your reactions? What jumps out at you from what I've just said?
I think it makes complete sense, and I wish actually I had your presentation a couple of years back when I was doing these things.
Well, it's not unusual because we don't know what we don't know, and I think as Susan shared through her case studies there, I mean and here's the thing, whilst we would like to support every organization, that's really not what this is about. I think it's just about magnifying the results of the survey. It's sharing our experiences, and even if you in the future just use this to your advantage internally, and just ensure that you're doing as much as you can internally to focus and support the partner, then that's a great step forward. You know, so I think it's just about being on that journey. But it is fascinating when you start to dig into the data. And again, remember, this isn't just our view. This was the view of over 3,500 people. When you start to look at the data, it's pretty incredible to see the impact that the partner can have on the assignment success. It really is.
Sorry, I thought Alistair put his hand up, maybe he didn't. No.
But I was, again, it's really good information. I had a little chuckle to myself when you were describing Aberdeen there, Susan. I didn't appreciate until I came back from my tenure in Sakhalin how, I guess, Aberdeen-centric an organisation can be with, and it would be sort of, you know, like unconscious bias, where we always think expat is going away and everything that we're doing that way. It was definitely that inpat experience, and you know, we think that everything in Aberdeen is very easy and it's easy to get around, and it absolutely isn't.
Right.
And when the penny drops, you know, you do realise, I think, how, you know, whether people are willing to kind of go out their way, and I can definitely see the need for having a, you know, like a service like this, because, you know, we're not great, you know, from an Aberdeen point of view, we're not great at going out for maybe, again, I think COVID is probably having a change, but support networks, people are more willing to engage and, you know, provide, you know, find like-minded individuals online, but, you know, a lot of the time when you immediately are dropped in somewhere, it can be difficult. And if the person who's working has got that work to do, they've got that focus, they grow their network. The person who's maybe not at work and has had a career, you know, different career, more successful, you know, doing whatever, yeah, and that definitely can make or break assignments.
Yeah. No,
Can I just ask how your support has changed over the last 6 months during COVID? Are you providing completely different types of support at the moment?
Yeah, it's a great question.
do you want me to pick that one up and then hand to you, Des?
Sure. Yep.
From a practical on the ground perspective, the support I offer is virtual. You know, we don't meet people. Not even if at the moment the net expat philosophy is because of globally this is the case. We'll just do virtual assignments, virtual discussions. That's actually worked quite nicely, because sometimes, you know, meeting people in coffee shops or in office spaces, that can be nice, but there's also you've got to pick up the kids and do this and do that and do the next thing. So doing it this way has had its benefits. I think in terms of the other, like the conversations, I suppose it's changed because people can see that there's less out there. And so I think a lot of my time just now is spent on helping people under the guise of redoing their CV or their LinkedIn profile, whatever, is about refinding what they're good at and what do they want to do here, rather than getting out and doing it. And then the next step is trying to help people figure out, as Alistair said, how do you connect into a network that was mainly like you go to a meeting, a professional body meeting or something like that, and now it's online, but you don't have that same opportunity to sidle up to somebody at the coffee point and say, hey, who are you? Because you're all staring at each other on a screen. So we're sort of talk about what are the practical things that you can do to help that. So it has changed. And I think it's increased the pressure because many companies, the company person has been at risk of redundancy. So here you've got an expat partner you're looking after who's trying to find a job, and their partner is under risk of redundancy. That's a horrible, horrible place. Yeah. They're in a foreign land, no support, not clear where they're going to go. At one point, I had an Australian lady married to an American chap, 2 young kids, one of whom she was breastfeeding. And because of the COVID restrictions at that point, husband made redundant, she couldn't get into America, and the husband and the 2 kids couldn't get into Australia, and she was breastfeeding. Can you imagine how stressful that was? Eventually, it ended up that the restrictions in Australia were lifted and they went there, but you can imagine, horrible. Des, how about you from your perspective?
I think that's a great sort of overview. But yeah, we've pivoted to complete virtual delivery of the training and coaching, and we're a very virtual company anyway, so that no great shakes there. I think it really goes to some of what's on this slide, and I'm not going to read through this, but I think what we have seen change, and sorry, I wasn't sure who asked the question, my screen has frozen, is around duty of care, and I think Susan hinted at some of that. A lot of what we've been doing has been the pastoral support as much as anything. We have a Net Expat community, which is an online global community. We've used that as a life raft for thousands of partners scattered around the world. We actually made that available free of charge, no commitment, just to give partners that were marooned in a very unfamiliar place, probably with zero network, the opportunity to stay connected with similar people. That has been incredibly well received. But from a duty of care perspective, I think we've seen the shift there. You know, companies are now beginning to consider mandating some of this support going forward and saying, you know, this will be a part of our sort of, you know, core support to people, because we want to ensure that we're providing that relevant duty of care in the same way that you would provide immigration support as mandatory, in the same way that, you know, companies are beginning to shift towards providing intercultural training as mandatory. And I think that makes sense. You know, it's tough enough to get people to sort of engage in the prospect of a move, so let's make sure that they really can make an informed decision. And I think that's really what this slide goes to. So that's another great segue. Thank you for the question. You know, the partner is the glue in the family. When it's a family situation, it's the partner that's the glue. It's the partner that will drive the success of the assignment or not, typically. And I think again there is a much broader emphasis on that as we come through COVID. So again, you know, hopefully some of what we shared today will be helpful. It'll help you to maybe, as I say, educate, you know, some of your stakeholders. But really, I think it is about ensuring that the partner believes that you're taking them into consideration. You know, they need to feel that, whatever that looks like. It might just be a conversation earlier in the process, you know, let alone delivering some support. But I think as long as they feel that, you know, that's a great start to success. And then finally, just a couple of suggested kind of, you know, takeaways. I think it's always a great opportunity to reflect and step back, you know, step into the shoes of maybe a partner that you might be moving in a month or a few months, and just reflect and say, you know, based on what we've done in the past, would this feel as if it's going to be supportive? Is it going to really give them the best opportunity of having not only a great experience, but also, you know, achieving assignment success? Because ultimately that's really what you're looking to do. You know, get them involved in the planning, you know, involve them in the conversations as early as you can. Understand the support and the options that are out there. As I say, cash is not typically a great solution. It's an easy solution, but it's not typically a great solution, and one that can be overcome very, very easily. And just, as I say, make your stakeholders and colleagues aware, you know, of the risk of not providing some support, but also the value of providing some proper managed support as well. So, you know, again, just some takeaways just to mull over and to think about, and maybe just sort of pick up with some of your colleagues internally. Susan touched on what we do. I mean, we do provide support in over 150 countries around the world. You know, it wasn't about coming here today to sell to you guys. It was about sharing our experience and sharing the findings from the survey. But if you did want to know a little bit more about who we are and what we do, you can certainly reach out to either myself or Susan. We'll be delighted to have a one-to-one with you. You can connect. We'll make sure that Shona's got the contact information to share with you as well. And particularly if you want a copy of the full report and research, you know, we're happy, as I say, to provide a link for you to be able to download that as well. So hopefully that's been helpful.
Thanks very much. Yeah,
I'm just going to ask Alistair, Debbie, any other questions or comments before we?
Oh, from my point of view, that was useful info share. It was a good reminder as well.
Yeah.
But, yeah, no, thanks for
Aberdeen
that.
ain't as friendly as that.
Yeah.
Debbie, from your side, just before we hand back to Shona.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, I agree with what Alistair just said, and no further questions on my side. Thank you. It's been really interesting.
Cheers. Thanks for sticking with it.
Thanks very much. It has really been interesting, Susan and Des. And on behalf of the branch, yeah, very much appreciate your time in doing this. And what I do, because we do, like I said, we did have quite a few people signed up, so I'll provide this information to those signed up, and they may reach out to you after this, and we'll ask if anyone obviously wants the slides as well. So definitely, yeah. Like I said before, I'd certainly wish we had your contacts, you know, a few years back, because you know we did have, you know, unsuccessful assignments because of partners being unhappy, you know, and not being able to connect properly. So yeah, that would have been extremely useful. And thanks again.
Our pleasure.
Oh, Judith just joined us as well.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything?
Timing, as they say, is everything. That's me literally just out the student induction. So thank you both very much. I'm looking forward to seeing the recording. It obviously all went well. I was watching my phone just in case you were sending me SOSs, but I'm delighted to see that it all went swimmingly.
It did. Thank you.
Good.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Excellent. Cool.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thank you.